we go. Welcome back. We're here with Michael Ventura again. And last time we ended with him living with Big Boy Medlin, Jeff Nightbird, and him in Silver Lake. And the LA Weekly had just started. So why don't you take it from there, Michael?
Well, thanks, Brennan. And I'll tell you frankly, one of the best things when I first got there, and the exciting thing, was here I am, a film critic in Los Angeles, and something I never intended to be, but as I've said, fell into it. And the screenings, the film screenings, are at the film studios. And I didn't expect that at all. And this is still the time, this is 1970, late 1978, early 1979. This is still the time when most Hollywood movies are made in Hollywood or on location somewhere. But now you've got, there are sound stages in Georgia, there are sound stages in Canada, there's some sound stages in Texas. It's not unusual for there to be sound stages in various parts of the world. But at the time, most soundstage stuff and studio stuff on the lot is in Los Angeles. And all the important producers are in Los Angeles. Late 1880s, 1990, early 1990s, you had important production offices in New York City. You'd be flying to New York for a meeting. But in the late 70s and 80s, it's still in Los Angeles. And I got to a screening at MGM. And I'm going through the gate at Metro Goldwyn Mayer. You know, the lion roaring and everything in all those pictures, and I'm actually there. And I won't pretend that I was cool about it. I was not cool about it. We're going past the Irving Thalberg building. I'm walking past. I parked my car. And there's the Irving Thalberg building where, in the old days, there was a writers building, a whole wing of the writers building. And the ones on contract to be writing in their little offices. And you know, some of them were famous guys. Raymond Chandler, William Faulkner, you know, they're writing away. And they direct me to a screening room on a soundstage. Now, the soundstages are huge, and these big hangar-like buildings. And I'm excited. I'm looking around, and I was excited. And there's a cafeteria that not the first time, but not too long after, I'm in the cafeteria, and I'm, you know, online on the cafeteria, and I'm seeing people I've seen on TV. I'm seeing all these, not the big stars, mind you, but all these familiar faces. One TV show or another, and they're just, you know, getting their lunch. But this first time, I'm directed to this long switchback stairway up the side of a soundstage, metal stairway. And there's a door at the top of it, of course, and I walk in, and there's a guy there waiting for me, and he's a projectionist. That's his gig at the screening rooms. And he says, go on in, screening room, something or other, one or two. And it's this tiered room with a screen that's not as big as a theater screen and not as small as my present television, which isn't small at all. You know what I mean? Now we have these huge screens. So it's about the size of a sheet, maybe two sheets. And there are about 3 or 4 tiers of seats, and it's narrow, so there are not many seats. But the seats are leather, and they're huge. And the ashtrays, because you could smoke anywhere in those days, the ashtrays are built for cigars. And the place, it's like the smell of cigars is coming out of the walls. And I was much more excited about being in the screening room than I was about whatever movie it was I was going to see. because the leather was very old. In some places it was frayed. In some places it was torn. This is a screening room that people have been watching movies in ever since MGM geared for sound in the late 1920s. And you could feel it. And you knew these big ashtrays made for cigars. They're the kind of people who'd been sitting there for decades. And that era was over, but the stuff was still there. It changed soon afterwards. And the screening rooms became like those little theaters of the mid-'80s, with the theater is small, the screen is kind of smaller than a regular one-screen theater.
Yeah.
And it was a little like that, but it was seedy.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't glamorous, except that you knew what it was. You knew who'd been sitting there. I mean, it could have, the stars and the producers and the directors would be watching the dailies in those rooms. I can't tell you what picture I saw. I have no idea. I was trying to be professional. I was taking notes and everything. But mainly, I was just astonished to be in that room. And then I go to a screening at Paramount. And I go through the lot, the front gate, and they tell me where to park. But off to my left is the Western set.
Yeah.
At Paramount.
Yep.
And I couldn't wait to get out of that screening, whatever it was I was seeing. I wanted to see the Western set, raining. And there was nobody around. And I walked into the bar that I'd probably seen 100 times on films. And there were lighting equipment this way and that. It looked like it had nothing but shot there for a while, and in fact, they would soon tear the Western set down, and there's a big parking lot there now, or it was the last time I was at Paramount. But I walked down the street, I walked into the jail, I walked into the hotel. I was just amazed. Here I am. It was more exciting than going to an actual old West town. Because this town, I'd probably seen dozens of movies and TV shows. And then, and this was the spookiest one, I had a screening in 20th Century.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah.
And I did not expect. I go through the gate.
Right.
And on my right, there's an elevated train from New York City, my childhood, and I'm going, oh my God. And I'm just, I can't believe it's there. It's there. And on my left, I don't realize they're office buildings with tenement fronts.
Right.
They're made to look like tenements out front. They're really office buildings that you go in from the back. But there was, I left New York City on a dead run, and there I was. It was like, oh my God. And I go to where they want me to watch the screening, and again, I don't know what it was. And I came back. I parked my car. They had me go park the car way in the back. And the screen was a long movie. Like I say, I can't remember. And I came back with my lights off and just kind of going real slow. And I went through this whole back lot of New York City. And it was like having a dream. And I'm looking at this empty New York City. And like that Paul Simon song, "The Only Living Boy in New York," that's what I really felt like. And finally went out back through the gate. And about a year later, it was that spring. Big Boy and I had a meeting with a producer at Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And we were going to eat in the cafeteria. And got wrong directions, and we were suddenly in the Western lot. We took a few photographs I've got somewhere of the two of us walking in the Western lot at Burbank Studios. And it was also clear, Big pointed it out, that MASH must have been shot there because that's the hill that you see behind the MASH thing where the helicopters.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we walked a little further, and it was the small town set that I think they're still using. Because it was in upkeep. The Western lot wasn't, but the small town set still was. So here we were, really where movies got made, where people didn't stare if they saw a star because they knew that that wasn't cool.
Yeah.
In New York, you'd stare. Here, this was just it's where they worked, and it's Burbank. It's where Johnny Carson was shooting The Tonight Show, and he coined the beautiful downtown Burbank thing.
Right.
And that was thrilling. There's no doubt about it. It was, we thought we were pretty cool, but that was thrilling. And
Yeah.
That's all about
I remember being at that Warner studio once with you, and there was one of the spaceships from V there. You remember that? And
yes.
We went over, and it was like out in the middle of nowhere, and we kind of looked around to see if anybody was looking, and I climbed up inside of it, and it was all empty inside. But yeah, I remember. It was pretty exciting. Yeah.
And so, writing in L.A., you knew that you were getting read, in the sense of you wrote about a film, and the director or his secretary or staff or wife read about what you wrote. You wrote about an actor, and the actor and his friends read about it. The agents read it. You were getting phone calls from various people. You were getting invited to this and that. I usually didn't go, but I got invited until they realized I wasn't going to show up.
How come you didn't go?
I didn't feel... Good question. I didn't feel comfortable mixing in those circles where I really, even when I finally had to go in some things, where I really didn't know the social
Mores.
Customs.
Yeah.
Mores. I would meet occasionally famous people, celebrities, real ones, phony ones, and usually that worked out pretty well, but I never felt like I fit.
Right.
And I wasn't trying to please anybody. And how can I put it? It could be I was shy.
Well, that atmosphere, my experience of it was ass kissing was really like a big part of it, and looking at people above you as if they're kind of like gods, and that's uncomfortable. I think the acceptance of ass kissing.
Yes, and the expectation of it.
And the expectation, yeah.
Because there'd be all kinds of pressure. For instance, when E.T. came out, if you saw E.T. before you saw the ad campaign, E.T. Extraterrestrial, directed by Steven Spielberg, before the ad campaign, you didn't know what the E.T. looked like. So the beginning was really scary. With the ad campaign, where you're seeing the extraterrestrial before you go to the movie, it changes the movie totally. I mean, it's a very well done picture.
Yeah.
But it changes the movie completely. So I'm going to there's E.T. I get invited to a screening. I like the picture. And as I say, the first 20 minutes plays totally differently because you don't know what you're going to find. And so that when you do see the E.T. and all the suspense has been kind of a joke, it's a great relief, and you kind of open up to the picture in a different way than you were going to see the guy you saw on the billboard. And so they said Steven Spielberg was doing 2 big interviews, me and the other, meaning the LA Weekly and Rolling Stone.
Wow.
And so I got a call from his people. Steven Spielberg, wants you to interview him. Okay. You have a half hour. I said, no, I don't. I'm not going to do this.
A half hour. Wow.
This is going to be, I need an hour. I said, to really talk about stuff, to get good stuff, I need an hour. Okay, you can have an hour, but you have to put him on the cover. I'm not promising the cover. What do you mean you're not promising the cover? Remember, at that time, everybody didn't know what Steven Spielberg looked like.
Yeah.
His first few films, he stayed in the back. And I said, look, I don't know the guy. I don't know if he got drunk the night before. I don't know if I'm going to get an interview out of him that's worth a cover. And I said, look, we want to put him on the cover. My editor wants to put him on the cover. If it's a half-assed good interview, we'll put him on the cover. Of course we'll put him on the cover, but I'm not going to promise it. They call back finally, okay, but your photographer can only do this and this and this. And my sense was, my photographer can fight his own battles. I've just fought mine.
Yeah.
And as it was, the photographer was Howard Rosenberg, who always did a good job. And as it was, that worked out very well. But I didn't know what Steven Spielberg looked like. I'm going to the office. I think it was in MGM, and I knocked. Somebody says, "Come in." It's a big office. It's got video games in it. It's got when video games were kind of new, like
right
back then. And here's a guy, more or less my age, maybe a little younger, sitting on the sofa. There's a kind of coffee table in front of him. He's got takeout lunch. He's eating, and I look at him and I say, Spielberg? And he said, yeah. I said, you're just a kid. He said, yeah, we're all kids around here. And the interview went very well.
Huh.
Another interview I remember, and this was also had its weirdness. John Huston, director I had complete admiration for, Treasure of the Sierra Madre,
Yeah.
Big Sleep, and on and on. The Maltese Falcon, not the Big Sleep, Hawks did the Big Sleep, the Maltese Falcon. And I'm going to interview John Huston. Well, I was only intimidated about interviewing 2 people my whole time in this job. John Huston and John Cassavetes, because those guys were heroes to me. And all the other people I interviewed, actors, directors, it was a gig. I was glad to do it, lucky to do it, but I wasn't intimidated by anybody. But John Huston, I knew about his life. I'd seen most of his films. I read his book. But in those days, I went around with a red bandana and a dungaree jacket, just because I felt like it. and he's at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And at first they didn't want to let me in, because they had a call out there, Michael Ventura scheduled for an interview. And the World Series was going to be on. And from what I read about him, I knew he'd probably be interested. I didn't want to cut into his World Series game. And I go up there, this room, and he's a little surprised to see a guy like me. But he was interested, because it's kind of the definition of hip and cool in the old sense. Very tall guy. And we started talking. And I said, questions I like to ask directors, what do you think? What's on your mind when you're preparing yourself to shoot? You're going to work. What do you say to actors? What blah blah blah, that kind of thing.
Right.
It sounds vague now, but I was more precise in those days. But and he was getting interested. And he finally broke in. He'd answer, give me these great questions. And he said, you haven't asked me yet about Bogart and Monroe. They all ask me about Bogart and Monroe. And I said something to the effect of, well, I'm kind of more interested in you right now. I'm interviewing. But I will ask. I said, okay. And at the end of the, he said some interesting things about when he was speaking about Marilyn Monroe, he said that she was photographing when he did the Misfits. She photographed 10 pounds lighter than she was. You'd watch it on the set. You'd watch a scene, and it would seem like she was just screwing up. And then you just kind of print a few takes and, okay, hope for the best. And then you'd watch it in the dailies, and she was terrific.
Wow.
On the set, she looked fat. You'd watch it in the dailies, she's perfect. And he said she knew what she was doing much better than we understood what she was doing.
Yeah.
She knew how it was going to play much better than I did. Until I got, after the first few days of dailies, I realized that she was doing fine, and I had to catch up to her, kind of thing. He didn't say those words, so I don't want to act like I'm quoting him, but that's the impression I got. And the other thing, one of the things he said was, how did he put it? That the camera, when it closes up on you, gets a close-up, it's looking so deep into you. And actresses have said this to me too, actors too. Jenna Rowland said that. Jenna Rowland said, the camera can just see every part of you just by looking at your face. You feel like you've exposed yourself totally. And she said, it sees your soul. And, it sees things you don't see in yourself when you look in the mirror. And Houston said something like that. But he said, when I said, how do you judge the most important scene in a photo, on a shoot? And he said, the most important scene is the scene you're shooting.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great answer.
Yeah.
And you see that in his films. Every scene is crafted.
That's interesting what you say about Marilyn Monroe and how it didn't play on the set, but then in the dailies it seemed different. It's almost like she's projecting something onto the film that isn't apparent during the actual filming.
Yes, and I wasn't the only one who noticed that. John Huston wasn't the only one who noticed that. When she did that film with Laurence Olivier, The Prince and the Showgirl, and they just hated each other. It was performing in that picture was a very famous English stage actress who was older, and who in my week with Marilyn, Judi Dench plays that actress. I can't remember the name of that actress, but she'd be hesitant on the set. She'd be late to the set. All this stuff. And the first time this old actress watched the dailies, she said, "Well, clearly she's the only one of us who knows what she's doing."
Wow.
So it was getting into L.A. And remember, at this time, 1979, 80, 81, L.A. had an inferiority complex. The downtown hadn't started being skyscrapers yet. L.A. felt inferior to New York. L.A. didn't have much nightlife. You had to, if you wanted all night, you had to go to the deli on Fairfax that I can't remember the name of, or the place with the pool tables on Sunset near La Brea, near La Cienega, not Sunset, Holloway, near La Cienega.
Yeah.
I also can't remember the name of.
You're talking about Musso and Frank's?
No, Musso and Frank's.
I mean the Fairfax one.
No, that was. It's a Jerry's or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
My memory for names has failed me every time on this.
Yeah.
And Musso and Frank's we couldn't afford.
Yeah.
Not back in those days. We couldn't afford the Pacific Dining Car, too. That was open 24 hours. We couldn't afford that. But then, partly because L.A. Weekly had a restaurant section. L.A. Weekly had a theater section. L.A. Weekly reviewed the clubs. This hadn't been done before, the way L.A. Weekly was doing it.
Yeah.
And it created a sense of scene that hadn't been spoken about before. There'd been scenes, but it'd been kind of a secret to most people in L.A. There were scenes with people who were, going to the Roxy, but the whole town wasn't in on it.
Yeah.
And we started to do that. We were part of that movement. Also, we didn't feel any inferiority to New York. Half of us were exiled New Yorkers, and the other half were exiled Texans or from wherever. And we felt we could do a good job as the Village Voice. Why not? And then people were telling us, no, this is a writer's paper, but people in Los Angeles don't read. And our attitude was, well, they read us. Good. and that turned out to be true. They did read us. Enough of them to keep a paper going for, 40 years now. But back there at the start, when things were very, very iffy, and the Chicago Reader had started an L.A. Reader, except they were formatting it just the same way they formatted the Chicago Reader. And Chicago ain't L.A.
No.
Blew them out of the water in about 2 years, 3 years, whatever it was, where even they hung on for longer than that, but they weren't a story, and we were. They didn't. God, they had awful covers, and we put stuff on the cover that people would, in such a way that people would pick it up. And something really should be said is that L.A. Weekly got a really good crew of younger people, younger than us, on the production side, on the art side, on the copy editing side. The people doing that stuff, copy editing, fact-checking, layout, design, they were good. And they made us look even better than we were. And that was also a big part of the paper's success. It wasn't just me and Ginger Varney and Jay Levin throwing our self-importance around. It was those people on the paper who were doing the nuts and bolts of actually getting a paper out there. And you look back and you feel like you've never thanked them enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the layout of the LA Weekly was so complex when you think about it. There's so many different sections and things that you had to bring attention to, and then all the ads, and the size of it was I mean, it was twice as big as the Reader, at least, right? And yeah, the you're right. I never thought about that before. That that was a lot of work on the layout for sure.
And that's why I'm about to go down a road maybe I wouldn't want to go down. I'm not going down. Some of us who were there right at the beginning on staff, me and Ginger and Jay and Joey David, Jay Levin, Joey David, Ginger Varney, we got stock in the paper. And I never asked for it. And by the late 1980s, there was a lot of push from some board members and some of the people who had stock in the paper, who were on the paper, to sell the paper.
Wow.
And make an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
And my position was that when the founders of a paper like this leave the paper, necessarily kill the paper. It doesn't necessarily make it a bad paper. Maybe it'll be a different kind of good. I'm certainly not condemning the people who are doing it now, but the impetus of the paper, the thing that inspired people about the paper, a lot of that goes out the window when the founders of the paper leave. They just pick up the money and go. So I gave back my stock. I didn't want it. I said, all these people, you know, the 4 or 5 of whatever was that stock, the 4 or 5 or 6 of us did not put out the paper. You got 40 people here or something who are putting out this paper and keeping those high standards. And they're part of all this, and they get nothing if it's sold except new bosses who want to cut costs. Excuse me. And I don't mean to sound like an idealist. It was just didn't set right to me. That's all.
Yeah.
I didn't want to live with that.
Yeah.
So I threw a lot of money away and said no.
You didn't cash out the stock. You just you gave it back.
Excuse me. I was paid something because they insisted I had to be.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a fraction.
Yeah.
Of the rest of it. And I never looked back. I didn't care. I didn't want to take the money on those terms. And so everybody thought I was crazy, and they were happy taking it. I was happy not taking it. We were all happy in the end.
Yeah. There's that's kind of a repeating theme in your life. I remember one time my friend Arnie said to me, you remember Arnie, and he said to me, why doesn't your stepfather's a screenwriter? Why doesn't he? I was telling him about like movies that you would turn down for screenwriting because they were just silly, right? And and in his way, he was, well, why not? Why doesn't he just get the money, And it is a theme in your life of that integrity. And when you talk about the LA Weekly changing at that point, LA was also changing at that point.
Yes. Very much.
And I don't think, I think you would have left anyway.
I had quit.
Right.
Remember, better part of 1 year, because I really thought the paper was going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And I thought,
but it wasn't just the paper going in the wrong direction, right? Like the culture in Los Angeles was going in a kind of, maybe it was like a cocaine hangover or something, but it was kind of going downhill, and the quality of film was definitely going downhill too. Do you think that?
Mm-hmm. I wasn't as concerned with that.
Right.
For me, it was, we were putting things in the paper that I didn't think belonged there, and we were putting out covers that I thought were dishonest. In content, it was a long time ago, and I don't want to. Yeah,
we're getting kind of ahead of ourselves
stir up too much mud.
Yeah,
But it wasn't. I didn't think it was a project with integrity anymore.
Yeah.
Then when Jay Levin left and Kit Ratcliffe came on, he made the paper better, and it looked like it was going to be better. And I came back for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then, but we're way ahead of ourselves there.
Yeah.
But when I say it had lost its integrity, okay, what was it? 1989. I'd just come back to the paper, so I left the paper in the spring of 1988. Jay Lemmon was not going to be the editor anymore, and the new editor hired me back, and we founders, me and Ginger and Joy and Dave, were going to get an award from, we were going to get the Upton Sinclair Award from the Liberty Hill Foundation. And I thought, we didn't deserve this award. But there was a big dinner, I mean, a lot of people.
Wow.
And
why didn't you think you deserved it?
Well, as I'm sitting there, the awards were given to various people. Okay, and the first bunch of people that they gave it to were lawyers who had defended the people in the 40s and 50s who'd been blacklisted. And they were very impressive people. And a Catholic priest who had stood up to the dictators in El Salvador.
Okay.
He was right there.
Yeah.
And risked his life every day.
Right.
And he got this award. And somebody else like that got that award. And then it was our turn. And
well, that's unusual. Why did they choose you guys to get the Upton Sinclair Award?
I think it was politics.
Really?
Backstage politics, yeah. But when I got up there, I said, I accepted my award. I still have it. It's the only award I've kept. It's hanging up here somewhere. I said, I'm happy to get this award. And I think we've done a good job as far as we've gone on this paper. But, we covered the Middle East better than we covered East L.A.
That's true. Yeah.
We covered Central America better than we covered South Central.
Yep. Yeah.
It took us 11 years to hire a black writer. It took us 12 years to hire a Latino writer. And I looked out among the people, and I said, and this isn't a really colorful audience, is it? I said, there's been a white paper for white people.
Yep. Yeah.
And this is not a strictly white city. And I said, so I'm proud of this award, but we have a long way to go. And I see some people here that represent parts of this city who haven't been written about. We have a new editor. Get him to take you out to lunch. Bug him, but make them notice you. And I sat down to a hushed crowd.
Yeah.
And then the famous person who it was going to be Michael Douglas, but it was the guy who directed Platoon.
Oliver Stone.
Oliver Stone. He was the MC. He didn't know what to say about me when I said that.
Yeah.
And then it was over.
What was the politics that you think made them give that award to you? You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but
this is complete. This is surmise.
Okay.
But behind the scenes, Jay Lemmon, Michael Douglas, their rich liberal friends. That's how I think we got it.
Okay.
But that's only my opinion.
All right.
But so I sat back down. The table was Ginger Varney, John Densmore, and his wife at that time, I think her name was Leslie, and a couple of other people. Waiting for to fall on us.
Yeah.
But the best moment was when that Central American priest and his table came over to me, and that priest hugged me. and they said, that was great. And I thought, this is my real award.
Yeah, yeah.
I got up there and told the truth, and these guys knew it. A bunch of people in the weekly hierarchy did not speak to me for some time.
Well, do you want to roll it back to 81 or so, or do you want to stop here?
This is probably... No, let's go. Let's roll it back to 81.
Yeah.
81, 82. The city was really feeling itself.
Yeah.
It was really coming into its own, and the Pope came. I forget what year he came, but it was a big deal. The Pope and the Olympics.
Pope had been the assassination attempt was 80, right? Or was it 79?
I don't remember, but he came after that.
Right. Yeah.
And there was the Olympics in the early 80s.
84, yeah.
84?
Mm-hmm.
And the town started to feel different.
Right.
About itself. It started to feel, it lost that inferiority complex in New York.
Right. Like New York had been the town until then. And then L.A., the Dodgers, the Lakers, the Olympics,
Exactly.
Showbiz
and
in general. Yeah.
You know, I think L.A. kind of looked around at itself and went, look at us. We're actually kind of interesting.
Yeah. Also, the music business.
Like any other town in the world.
The music business moves from New York to L.A. Then, so, yeah.
And you know, this is an important cultural center. Maybe you don't like the culture. That's different, but it's an important cultural center in a whole lot of ways. Certainly for writing in all kinds of ways, and I'm being too vague again, but looked at each other. I think LA looked at itself. Angelinos looked at each other and saying, "This is a pretty interesting town. I like this town."
Yeah.
And not looking over our shoulder and saying basically to the New Yorkers who would come and put it down, "That's okay. You're putting it down, but what are you doing here?" You're putting it down, but you're here. You're not there. What are you doing here?
Yeah.
And realizing that we were in this unique place for its time and place. You know, it's true that New York City, and to a lesser extent Chicago, were the first cities in the world, really, to have such a mixture of people in them. And to everybody's surprise, not to blow up. Yes, there's a riot every once in a while. Yes, there's burning every once in a while. But basically, you have all these different kinds of people, and that's new. That's still experimental. And there was L.A., where when I was writing about this anyway in the early 80s, early 90s, where you had more languages in the school system than anywhere else in the world.
Yep.
And,
yeah. My school was, I think there was something like 46 different languages spoken in that school. Yeah.
And this is still an experiment that it's easy to say hasn't succeeded, but it also hasn't failed.
Yeah.
It has been in the process of almost succeeding, almost failing over and over again, but it's still going on. And I hate to sound positive; it sounds so uncool, but there is that aspect that speaks well of us, because we are still trying.
No, that time in LA was really kind of a pinnacle, I think, of civilization in general. And the makeup of the town at that time was there was a balance there where it hadn't been totally like the avalanche of Central Americans and Mexicans hadn't come there, but there was kind of an equal amount of blacks, Mexicans, whites. You could kind of divide the whites, I guess, into Jewish and non-Jewish, and then all the non-Jewish people kind of split. But at least like my family, like the Irish Catholic part of LA, just kind of disappeared. But yeah, at that time, and then there was a large Japanese population too, which kind of disappeared. Doesn't seem like it was as big, but I mean that was still
now there's a Koreatown.
Right. Yeah.
The Chinese are more so now.
Yeah.
The Philippines, big. There are areas of town that are called different names than when we lived there.
Right. Yeah. But when we were living there, there was still the gardeners were Japanese, which is an interesting thing. But I think the massive influx of all those different little groups of people, we started seeing Little Armenia and Little Thailand and these places. And at the time, in that early 80s time, there was kind of a team, as messed up as some of those neighborhoods were, there was kind of like an Angelino community, and we kind of felt like we were in one big team, and we're all trying to build a community in a weird way. And I don't know, one of the things that really typifies that to me is how they used to have those electrical billboards above the freeway, and now they just have freeway conditions on them or weather conditions. But at the time they would have these funny little like positive phrases. Remember that? I don't remember exactly what it would say, but it would be like some little like positive aphorism or something, to cheer you up when you're in a traffic jam going downtown or something.
Well, I haven't lived in LA now for almost 20 years, so
yeah, me either.
I don't know what it's doing now.
Yeah.
It changes. I know New York is not the New York I left at all, and that has nothing to do with population shifts, or rather the population shift it has to do with is rents are so high, the speculation is so high, that only people who can afford it are living there.
Right.
You've got people paying $1,000 a month for something the size of our little kitchen here.
Yeah. Well, that's happening in LA too. Yeah.
And that brings a whole other kind of people in, and a whole other kind of people gets thrown out. So we looked this up the other day, Jasmine, my wife, and I. The apartment at 1280 Decatur Street, where my brothers and sister and I and my mother had such a hard time, we won't go into details, but such a hard time, that rents for $2,000 a month, and it is a condo that could be had for $800,000, and it's the same damn place.
Yeah.
So whoever's living there now is coming from a completely, utterly, totally different background and set of values and everything, and that's happened in LA too. But going back again to 1981, 1982, it was a very exciting time to be in LA.
Yeah.
It was LA really waking up to itself as a city, realizing this is one of the important cultural centers of the Western Hemisphere, and certainly with New York, one of the two most important cultural cities in the United States. And
Yeah. I was very excited to move there. I guess we moved there in 81. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the Go-Go's come to mind for some reason. But just, they had this video of, I think it was Our Lips Are Sealed, where they're driving around LA and just being happy and positive. And yeah, it was exciting. Yeah, it was a good time for sure.
Well, I think we can wrap it up there.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Then, well, I'll talk to you next time then.